Hey everybody, how are you? Batya, the baby coach here, and we're here today to talk about the upcoming clock change. Now we have a few weeks till it's happening, but I always say slow and steady wins the race, and that's the way to make sure that we can always navigate our way through these challenges, through these hurdles, and prepare properly. Now let me just share this in the places I need to share it, because we also have people calling on in. Let me just start that. Not everybody has Facebook access when they're at work, and I know it's right smack in the middle of a work day, but I am just like not a night person these days, so I figured better to come in. You can always check out the replay and try it all later. All right. Okay, so we have people calling in who are listening from their phone if they're on their lunch break at work, even though it's a little late for a lunch break. Let me just share this in all the groups. I promised everybody it would be, so everyone give me half a second here, because we have everyone who is in my private Facebook group who wants to do this, wants to listen to this and watch this. And then we have people also, if you are not yet in there, definitely check it out in the Ultimate Baby Sleep group, which is my Facebook group where we pick questions, we answer you. I have a team of admins and moderators and coaches working on in there. They help you. And then, of course, if you are working more intimately with me, I have my other page, other group. I'm just going to share it in there because I know people wanted to watch it in there too. Okay, amazing. It's in all the places it's supposed to be. Fantastic. Okay, so if you are watching live, say hi to me in the comments below. If you are listening live, unfortunately, there's no way to ask your question. Oh, wow, there's a lot of you. There's like 20 phone numbers, and I might try to unmute some of you at the end if I have some time and pick some questions. But if you are watching live from the Facebook page or from one of the groups I'm sharing in, definitely say hello below and ask me all of your questions, because this is live. That's why we're doing it live. We could always do a video. I could always post it on the YouTube channel or post it here, but I like to do these live videos on topics because then you can pick my brain and ask me questions. Okay, so definitely say hi below, tell me you're watching, and let me know if you're nervous about the upcoming clock change, okay? All right, so let's get going. Let's talk about daylight savings time, okay? For those of you who live in the United States, we are all, most of you, hi Lisa, how's it going? I don't know if it's the entire United States actually, because I think it is typically most of it, where we change the clocks. And you all know, hey Marin, how are you? Spring forward, fall backwards. Hey Stephanie, how's it going? All right, so that's the rule of thumb, spring forward, fall backwards. In the springtime, the clocks, we make an hour later. It's all fine, it's all dandy. That's typically the easiest of clock changes. It's usually the easiest one to navigate. It's usually fairly smooth, even if your child is not the most adaptable child in the world. Usually the springtime change, when we make it later, is pretty seamless and painless. This one though, fall backwards, can be a doozy. Okay, that means on November 4th, if you live in the United States, we are moving the clocks back an hour. Now, if you're not a parent, then that's great. Oh my gosh, you get to sleep in an extra hour, right? Because normally you have to, that alarm goes off ding, ding, ding at 6 a.m. and you have to pull yourself out of bed, but 6 a.m. becomes the new 5 a.m. So it like tricks that you get that really extra hour. But if you are a parent and you have children, and well, if you're a parent, you have children, if you have a baby that's not sleeping well, or a toddler that's struggling with early rising, that just means you are losing another hour of sleep, right? So it can be very challenging and very difficult. So I always say slow and steady wins the race. Like anything, if you're properly prepared for the challenges that are coming up, you can kind of be armed with information to navigate your way through daylight savings time. It shouldn't just bang you on the head and suddenly your child is waking up at 4 a.m. when they used to wake up at 5 a.m. Like, let's talk about it. All right, how many weeks is it actually? Today's the 16th. So we have 2.5 weeks, which is more than enough time. And I wanted to come in here so you have time to like fiddle around with some of the ideas I describe, play around with some of the different things that I talk about, so you can give me feedback and you can see what works for your child, okay? Hey, Anna. Hey, Suzette. Emily's been looking forward to it. Awesome. Ness, Nina. Awesome. Okay, I'm so excited. Remember, guys, start posting your questions below. And if you are calling in, because I know a lot of you are calling in from work, I will try to pick a few questions at the end live. Okay, so stay till the end. I'm planning on talking for about 15, 20 minutes, nothing major, to kind of give you a little quick rundown, and then I'll pick a few questions and ask, okay? So let's first talk about why this clock change is challenging, okay? Depending on your child's temperament and overall nature. All right, I had a whole sleep personality series that we ran probably about 5-6 months ago. We might go in and run that again. every child has a different personality in life, right? Just like adults. Some of us are more easygoing. Some of us are more laid back. Some of us are more like structure oriented. So obviously, depending on how your child transitions in and out of new situations, lack of structure, tons of structure is obviously going to affect how well your child does with the clock change, okay? And specifically, because this clock change is the one that's more challenging, if you have an easygoing kid who typically goes with the flow, doesn't really matter if you put them to bed a half an hour earlier, they're all right, they still wake up the same time every day, you're good to go. You're fine. A lot of these ideas might not apply to you, but if you're watching this, you probably don't have the most easygoing child or easygoing sleeper because you're probably really nervous and anxious, and that's why you want to learn about the clock change, okay? So if your child has a little bit of a difficulty with transition, if your child has challenges when you put them in a new environment, or they meet new people, or they don't always acclimate to new situations so easily, especially when it comes to their internal clock engaging it, you're going to want to prepare ahead of time, okay? Now, ahead of time means about a week to week and a half before the clock change, starting to work with your child's body to get them acclimated to the new time. Now, why do I like to do this? Depending on your child's age, and this is pretty technical, under 1 year of age, usually it could take about 2.5 weeks if you have a really headstrong child that has a really difficult time with transitions to get used to the clock change. But once your child is 2, 4, 6, as they get older, and I just want you to be properly prepared, I'm not telling you this to scare you, it can sometimes take 4 weeks for a child to adjust. So knowing your child's personality, that's why I wanted to come in early, so you have a few weeks to jumpstart this and suddenly you're not like coming to work and having been up at 4 a.m. and you're exhausted. Knowing who your child is, knowing how your child responds to his or her surroundings, his or her transitions, new things, lack of schedule, how easygoing they are, and your child's age, you're going to want to decide how early to start doing this. Like I said, the older they get, oftentimes it can be 4 weeks or so till they adjust. Under 1, even if they're really, really, really temperamental and have a really difficult time with transition, it doesn't usually take more than 2 weeks. I say usually because, as you know, I always say children are not robots we can program, and every child has their own story, their own nature, how they respond to things, okay? All right, I'm going to look at these questions in a minute, Anna, and I see your questions, okay? Everyone else post your questions below so I can answer you, which is why we're doing this live, okay? So, what do you do? All right, I'm going to take a schedule. Let's pretend a child is on a 7 to 7 schedule. 7 p.m. bedtime, 7 a.m. wake up, which is really, really not so common. Most children are 11 and a half hours or 11 hours and 45 minutes if you're lucky. But for all intents and purposes, to discuss the theory here of discussion, we're going to say 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. is when your child is currently sleeping those glorious 12 hours. Now, when we change the clock at midnight, Saturday night, transitioning into November 4th, 7 to 7, everything is going to shift because we're moving everything back. So suddenly your child Sunday morning is going to wake up at 6 a.m. Now, it's still the same for your child's body, okay? Now, I'm explaining this because even though the clock change and changing, daylight savings back and forth is obviously not so complex, it gets complicated when you're working with their sleep, and I just want to break it down so you don't get overwhelmed. I get a lot of emails this time of year, a lot of people calling us and asking questions about how to figure this out, so I just want to make sure you are crystal clear, okay? Oh, wow, there's a lot of people calling in. All right, okay, so 7 p.m. bedtime, Saturday night. Normally your child sleeps till 7 a.m., but now is going to be waking up at 6 a.m. And remember, they're not getting an hour less of sleep. We just changed the timing, but their internal clock still thinks it's 7 a.m. What does that mean, though? Once we change the clock, if you haven't done any prep work, and I'm going to teach you how to do prep work, once we change the clock, what happens? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, as the week progresses, your child is suddenly going to bed earlier, or they're going to bed at their internal clocks 7 p.m., which is the new time 6 a.m., and now they're waking up at 6 a.m. But here's where the issue arises. A lot of kids who are easy, who are adaptable, who have no problem with the transition, they'll just get on a 6 to 6 schedule, no big deal. And quite honestly, it will self-rectify. They'll start to get a little bit later because their nap transitions or because they're in school and their body just adjusts to the lunchtime and everything else, and they'll slowly get back into 7. Eventually, every child gets back into the 7 to 7. The question is, does it take a week or does it take 6 months, okay? So if you have an easygoing child, you don't need to worry. They'll probably just self-correct, okay? And obviously, as adults, we do a great job, usually, at getting our internal rhythms. The hour doesn't throw us off too much, okay? What happens though if your child doesn't just kind of like shift this, doesn't just kind of start making 6, slowly turn into 7 and get back on par? What can happen is you have this overtired disaster start to create itself, okay? So your child now goes to bed at 6 p.m., new time, body's clock thinks it's 7 p.m., right? And doesn't adjust. And now suddenly, not only does your child wake up at the new 6 a.m., still internal clock 7 a.m., but it can cause your child to actually creep backwards with the timing of when he or she wakes up. Why? Why, Batya, is my baby going to wake up earlier? Because their body thinks it's the same time. That doesn't make any sense, right? That's what you might be thinking. Why would my baby suddenly wake up earlier when really they're still going to bed at the same time? They might still be going to bed at the same time, but breakfast, nap time, all the routines of these very structured children that have a very difficult time with transitions, that's all on the new time. So it throws off their internal clock. Whoops, just hit the mic for those of you listening in, sorry. It throws off their internal clock so drastically that 6 a.m. creeps to 5:30, which creeps to 5. So not only does your child's early rising get earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier and earlier, you also start to go down the road of your child being drastically overtired because they're getting less and less and less sleep, but their body hasn't caught up. So it can be really challenging and really frustrating. Aside from the fact if right now you already have an early riser, some of you could be watching this now who are already struggling with your child waking up in the 5s, dare I say the 4s, okay? That just means you're going to start your day off at 3 a.m., okay? I don't want that for you. So that's why it's a problem. That's why it can potentially create a problem. Okay, so now you understand when a child transitions easily, when a child has a more difficult time. What do you do? Okay, like I said, under 1 year old, even 1 year old, whatever, even when a child is really has a challenge with navigating changes, disruptions, transitions, usually about 2.5 weeks, but as they get older, it can take longer. So you're going to want to start now. If you've got a 3 or 4 year old who thrives on consistency, who has a really difficult time when you make bedtime different, gets riled up easily, you're going to want to start tonight with this. It's a fairly simple situation, what you do. Again, 7 to 7 I'm using as my example, okay? So you have 7 p.m. bedtime now, 7 a.m. wake up, and I know it's not always happening like that, but let's just talk about it that way, okay? So you've got 7 p.m. bedtime, 7 a.m. What I actually want you to start doing is start making bedtime later. Why would I make bedtime later? Because you want to start setting the tone now so that way, if your child needs more time, if your child is having a difficult time with potentially adjusting to things, you're getting your child's body ready now. So you're spending about 2.5 weeks now with the adjustment and another week or so after the time change. So all in all, it'll take that 3-4 weeks. Or if you have a child that you think will take less time, do a week before the clock change and a week after. What you want to do, really easy, okay? But you want to do it slowly, because if you just rip off the Band-Aid and suddenly try to keep your child awake an extra hour, it's detrimental, right? Like let's say you do nothing. I'm just going to throw it all out there and then tell you what to do. Let's say you have this really type A personality kid, really difficult time when you change bedtime around, really doesn't do well, gets overtired easily, or a baby that goes berserk when they're not on their schedule. And you decide, you know what, Batya, I don't really care about this prep work. All right, I don't want to do anything. Let my baby adjust. I've never done anything before with my other kids, or my toddler's fine. Do what you want. Okay, that's first of all. Just here to offer you guidance and help you. But if you just do this, the 7 p.m. bedtime, suddenly it's November 4th. Everything's an hour earlier. The 7 p.m. bedtime suddenly is 6 p.m. But you decide, no, I don't care about this stupid clock change. My kid goes to bed at 7. So your child thinks it's 7 p.m., even though it's 6 p.m. on the new clock. And you decide, I'm going to keep my child awake an hour till the new 7 p.m., which is 8 p.m. for them, right? 8 p.m. for their internal clock, even though it says 7 p.m. on the actual clock you're looking at. Your child is being kept awake an entire hour longer than normal. And if your child has a difficult time with adjustment, that is a recipe for exhaustion. More night wake-ups, earlier and earlier rising in the morning, potential nap fighting, and then just like, oh my goodness, it all fall apart. So that's why I want to help you. I want you to have the tools so you're not in a bad place where you suddenly get stuck, okay? So back to what to do. So starting tonight, starting a week before, I wouldn't recommend doing this after the clock change because then it just gets tricky with timing and trying to figure out the ideal time to do it. Start a week ahead of time today, 2 weeks ahead of time, start with prep work. Start by making bedtime a drop later. Now, what did I just say? I do not want you making bedtime an hour later. I'm not going to tell you suddenly that 7 p.m. bedtimer tonight, you should suddenly make bedtime 8. It doesn't work that way, especially with these non-adaptable kids, right? You want to very slow increments. Every 2 to 3 nights, bump bedtime by about 10, 15 minutes tops. Okay, so your child's going to bed. And let me know if this makes sense, by the way, everyone who is watching live. I know you can't tell me if you're calling in from your phone, but write in the comments below, yes, Batya, this makes sense. Or give me some thumbs up or some hearts. Yes, this is resonating with me because I have anxiety about the upcoming clock change. Don't have anxiety. Just follow these instructions. But please let me know if this makes sense to you or if you need any clarification. That's why I'm doing this live. I could have just done a video and sent it all on your way, but I want to make sure this makes sense, okay? Because it can get really confusing. So, thank you, Ariella. Okay, and everyone else. Kaylee, thank you. Okay, so, Katie, awesome. 7 p.m. bedtime, Olga. Tonight, you're going to bump to 7:10. Hey, Roz. Okay, awesome. 7:10, maybe 7:12, right? It doesn't have to be so exact. All right? So, you're going to do that for today's Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. You're going to bump it on up to 7:15, maybe 7:18, right? It could be within 5, 10, 10-minute increments, every few nights. Okay? Now, how that works is you're doing it slowly, but you are still making it later. So a week into it, your child's probably going to bed about a half an hour later, give or take. Okay? Today's Tuesday. By next Tuesday this time, potentially your 7 p.m. bedtimer is going to bed around 7:30. But you don't want to push it. Okay? This is when you have to use that motherly or fatherly, if you're watching, intuition and decide, how is my child responding? Because some kids will start waking up a little bit earlier if they have a hard time with transition, and even those 10, 15-minute increments every few nights is still too drastic. And you might see, oh, the mornings are creeping a little bit later, or I'm seeing a little bit of overtiredness, because a telltale sign of a child being overtired is early rising, like in big red flashing lights, okay? So if that happens, stick with that 7:30 bedtime right in the middle for a little bit longer, for another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 week and a half, whatever you got to do. When you feel your child is doing well, then work on the second half an hour. It could be before the clock change. It could be after the clock change. Just like keep mentally in mind what time your child's body thinks it is so you don't get confused. And then work on the second half an hour. 10, 15 minutes every 3, 4 nights, every 2, 3 nights. Make it gradual. And if you have a child that transitions easily, it's no big deal, right? If you have a child that can smoothly transition in and out and do well, you'll be done. In a week and a half, chick-chock, they're done, they're adjusted, they're fine, and you might not even need to do this prep work. But if you have a difficult time with your child adjusting to the new time, you might have to take a little longer and spend a solid 4 or 5 weeks. But it is worth it to do it slowly than to push your child's body to do something prematurely that he is not ready to do, which causes him to be overtired and causes you to lose sleep over it and causes exhaustion. Okay? Slow and steady wins the race. It's just about bumping it later, but I wanted you to have a background information and understanding why I explained it this way. Whoops. And why I want you to do it slowly and gradually, because it's based on who your child is. All right, let's look at some of these questions live. Oh, I can't see them on my computer. And then I'll call on a number or two calling in if anyone has a question. All right. Let's see. Sarah from Rested Moms Club. How are you, my dear? Okay. What if you can't change wake-up time? If I put them to bed later, they still need to wake up for us to get out of the house the same time. Yes, that is an awesome question, Sarah. I can always count on you to ask amazing questions. You always ask the best questions in our private Facebook group. Okay, so listen up. Let's say what Sarah's asking is, okay, great, I'll adjust the bedtime, but I still have to wake my kid up. And they're not necessarily going to start sleeping later in the morning because I can't let them. Because before you change the clock, 7 a.m. is 7 a.m. and you got to wake them up, get out of the house and start things. So you do that. You don't have a choice, all right? You either decide, and again, this is a judgment call for you. You might decide, well, my child's like really easygoing or more on the easygoing side, that it's worth the investment to work on bedtime now, and then I'll work on actual morning wake-ups after the clock change. You might decide, totally not worth it. That extra half an hour of sleep makes or breaks it for my kid. They are going to totally lose it. I'm doing this post-clock change. I don't always recommend doing that. It's only if you really think your child's going to have a meltdown. Do it a week before. Okay, especially I know how old your babies are. Okay, do it a week before. Work on it then. They'll be a little more tired, but they're anyway going to be a little more tired when you're trying to adjust them, and then move forward. Okay? Let's pick a few more questions. Some people said they've been working on this. Okay, let's see. Kaylee. And if I don't answer your question live now, I will come back in later because I want to pick 1 or 2 people on the call who are calling in also. Kaylee, I get up at 5 a.m. every morning, and most of the time, so does my 4-month-old. I normally get him ready for bed around 6:15 and asleep around 7. Just transitions into his crib, and he wakes up 1 to 2 times at night. Should I be going to bed earlier since he wakes up at 5 a.m.? So this is kind of like a twofold question, Kaylee. You're asking what to do now. Like, should I rearrange bedtime because he's waking up so early? And guess what? Clock change. What's that going to be for 5 a.m.? 4 a.m. You have to do something about it. You don't want to start your day off at 4 a.m., Kaylee. So what I recommend doing is, starting to bump bedtime now to be a little bit later, but don't push it. Because if you already have an early riser waking up at 5 a.m. every day, you jump the gun too much and make morning start too early, or make bedtime too late, too quickly. That 5 a.m. is going to be 4:30, going to be 4. So follow this idea of gradually, slowly. For you, maybe don't do 10, 15 minutes. Maybe do 5, 10 minutes. Have it be a little more gradual. And your goal should be post-clock change. You could even get your baby sleeping till even just 5 a.m. post-clock change, right? Or excuse me, even 6 a.m. post-clock change versus 5 a.m. now, because you're kind of going to do a 360. And then once that's set, then start bumping it a little bit later. Because if your child's only getting 10 hours of night sleep, it's a little bit for a 4-month-old. I won't say it's anything unheard of. It's on the low end of averages, but I would like to see a 4-month-old getting a little bit more night sleep. So I would try to rearrange it in such a way like that. All right, let's pick. I don't know if anyone who's calling in has a question, but I will call on you if you do. Let's see. I'm just going to pick a random phone number here, and if you don't have a question, just say, "Hi, Batya, I don't have a question," okay? Because I'm just going to pick some callers here who are calling in from the phone. Let's pick, oh goodness, what's a fun area code? This looks like an interesting area code. Okay, 757418. I am unmuting you. Can you hear me? 757418. Are you there? Can you hear me? No? Yes? 757? Okay, guess not. Maybe doesn't want to ask a question. All right, I'm going to pick another one here, and if we don't get anyone on the phone, that's fine, because I can't really see if you have a question. There's no way to, like, raise your hand on the phone when they're just calling in. Let's see. 251559. You are unmuted. Can you hear me? 251599. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Who's this?
Hi, good. It's Lori and Ari.
Lori, I know you, my dear. That's funny.
Yes.
All right, so you're on already. You hear people are watching from Facebook also. Why don't you tell me? I mean, you and I are anyway working together now, but it's all good. You always have good questions. What are your questions on the upcoming clock change, my dear Lori?
Well, at this point, I'm still just kind of listening. I don't know when to start him on this, since he is pretty easy, although we are having that 5 a.m. issue with him, 4 or 5 a.m. wake-up time. So I don't know when I should start.
So I can actually completely answer this for you, because Lori is working with me in my VIP program, so I know all about your baby. You should start, I don't want you starting this until a week before. I was going to tell you when we're working together, but about a week and a half before is when you should start. Because if you do it prematurely now, I'm nervous his early morning risings are going to creep even earlier. So I want you to start about a week and a half before, and then it'll be a nice smooth transition to getting his mornings to be more solid. It actually, you will use the clock change to your advantage, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but you should do it in about a week and a half before the clock change.
Okay.
Okay?
Cool. Okay, thank you.
All right, and I'm going to write you back in your email actually as soon as I get off this, so I'll recap that for you. All right, talk soon, Lori.
All right, bye.
Okay, Lori actually brought up a good point of something I wanted to tell you all, is how can you use this clock change to your advantage, right? How can you use this? If you have an early riser, how do you make this better? By helping your child not wake up even earlier. And this is when you can use this to your advantage. On a normal day, on a normal bedtime, on a normal week, it's oftentimes challenging to rearrange bedtime. It's challenging because you still have the naps and lunch and your whole daytime structure happening at the regular times. And oftentimes, what you want to do with an early riser, albeit steady and slow, is you almost want to take, let's say you've got like a child that's waking, let's say this example of someone who just asked, I don't remember your name, Kaylee, I think. Her baby goes to bed at 7 and wakes up at 5. So in such a case, Kaylee wants to actually pick up her child's 10-hour sleep window, move it over, and put it back down. But it's not so simple. You can't just pick it up and move it over, because what did I tell you multiple times? You can't push a baby. You can't suddenly keep them awake an hour later. So you use this idea of 10, 15-minute increments, making bedtime a little bit later. But if you do it now, it's hard because you still have your baby waking up the same time from naps, and suddenly they're awake longer and longer and longer between naps, and it's hard. The clock change, everything shifts with you. So if you do the prep work ahead of time, you have the ongoing existence of naps being later and lunch being later and morning routine being later and the whole day-to-day activity for kids who are thriving on consistency, who love to have that predictability, all working to your advantage so you can take that bedtime, make it a drop later by slowly and incrementally making it later. And then suddenly the mornings will start creeping a little bit later, a little bit later, a little bit later. Right? Does that make sense, everybody? Let's see some more questions here. Okay, so Carolyn, my baby's waking up earlier and earlier. How do I handle that with daylight savings coming up? So start now, Carolyn. If your baby is waking up earlier and earlier and your normal 6 a.m. is turning into 5:30, is turning into 5 to 4:30, start now by slowly making bedtime a drop later. So by the time the clock change comes, you've already got a decent routine set up, and you just mold it to the upcoming time by continuing to shift things slowly, gradually. That is the key. Don't, for a child like yours, Carolyn, if your baby is having a hard time already now pushing through the mornings, doing something drastic is only going to make it worse. Slowly, steadily start to acclimate your baby to the new time by slowly, and if you feel like 10, 15 minutes is too much, do it by 5 or 10 minutes. Work with who your child is and what you know about them, okay? Let's pick a few more questions. Oh, this is an awesome question. Ariella, let's see. They're all awesome questions. I'm just trying to pick broad spectrum. Okay, what are your tips for activities to keep baby awake that extra 10, 15 minutes so they aren't stimulating and makes it more difficult for them to wind down, but slowly that they're constantly rubbing their eyes? Such a good question. What do you do, Batya? Great, Batya. You're telling me to keep my baby awake by 10 minutes every 3-4 nights, 15 minutes, but I don't want to stimulate my baby, right? I don't want to start like putting on flashing lights and dancing and clapping and everywhere, because that's going to stimulate my baby and make it more difficult for them to fall asleep. But conversely, I can't just do calming, wind down, happy time because my baby's going to fall asleep because they're so tired. Happy medium, right? Obviously, just like different personalities, some kids get stimulated easily. Some kids get stimulated a little bit less. Some kids have difficult time winding down from exciting activity. Know your child. That is always the key. Know who your child is and how they respond to the world around them. But even more than that, Ariella, okay, even more than that, if you feel like your child will get stimulated easily, despite any efforts, try to just keep it calm and relaxed without letting it be too stimulating or too sleep-inducing. You know, like instead of having the lights completely turned off in the room like you normally would, and you're rocking and you're shaking and you're starting to get them to sleep, maybe have a dimly lit light with like some books and some cuddling. It depends on your kid's age, right? But you want to keep it a happy middle ground between stimulation and sleep. Somewhere in between where you can kind of be in this in-between transitional gray place, and do it slowly, right? Because if you do it slowly enough, you're never going to get to that really dangerous zone of them being so exhausted that they can't help it, right? So if 10, 15 minutes is too much, do 5, 10 minutes, like I said, okay? All right. Aubrey, I love you, Aubrey. You're the best. Can you talk about daytime change too? Yes, Aubrey, I can always count on you to make sure I don't forget anything. For those of you who don't know who Aubrey is is my right-hand sleep coach in the free group, in our free Ultimate Baby Sleep group where we answer your questions. She's my right-hand sleep coach in our Rested Moms Club group where you work with us independently, and she always has my back because my brain is flying. So Aubrey, you are awesome. Okay, Aubrey wants me to talk about, which is so important, how to shift daytime too, right? I'm talking about bedtime. How do I do that with naps? How would I recommend doing that with naps? I'm suddenly telling you to bump bedtime 10, 15 minutes later, which is hopefully gonna make mornings happen 10, 15 minutes later. What about naps, right? So if your child is in daycare, fortunately and unfortunately, they're often not going to always follow the rule. They probably just are going to shift them by an hour. That's just how daycare works, most of them, unless you're very, very lucky. They have regulations they go by. They have their certain schedule they go by. So if your child, let's say you've got, a 19-month-old, right? We're on the 7 to 7 schedule. You've got a 19-month-old that usually sleeps 11 to 1 at daycare. So now that the clock changed, it is now an hour earlier for their body, right? They're still going to put them down at the new 11 a.m., but your child is not necessarily going to be ready for sleep then, or your child could potentially be overtired for sleep then. So there's no way around it. If your child's at daycare, they usually just go head on into the deep end with the new time, and that's why it's even more important that you work on doing your homework at home and making bedtime shift, because it's going to help the transition be so much smoother. If your child is at a private babysitter or home with you and you have complete control over the nap structure, use the same rules. Follow with how you're doing it for bedtime and for mornings. 10 to 15 minutes, do 10 to 15 minutes later for naps. You're doing 5 to 10 minutes, do 5 to 10 minutes of naps. Keep a consistent, even flow so everything is slowly moving later. But if you can't control it, what's going to end up happening is bedtime's going to move a little later. Nap's going to stay the same. Nap's going to stay the same, but that's okay. It's going to still help that you're doing all the head work at home to make everything transition later. Okay? Awesome. All right, so I'm going to head out. I just wanted this to be brief, a little 20, 30 minutes telling you all what to do about the clock change. It doesn't have to be so scary, okay? And I know there's a lot of anxiety around this. I know there's a lot of tension around this because sleep is something that we all need as parents, myself included, got 5 of my own, right? When your baby's not sleeping, it's stressful, it's exhausting, it's frustrating, it's everything potentially bad that you can think of when you're in that really exhaustion place and it's 5 a.m. and suddenly we change the clocks and now you woke up at 4 a.m. and you have a whole day ahead of you of laundry and work and errands and still being a mommy or daddy. It's hard. So do the homework, watch the tips in this video. If you have to rewatch it a few times, figure out who your child is, how long you think they need to transition, what your game plan is going to be, and stick with it. If you stick with it for 3 weeks, you'll be in an awesome place. If your child needs a little bit more time, give them a little bit more time. Just do it gradually and don't push your child's body to do something before they are ready. But if you have an easygoing kid and you know that historically you've been fine, okay, so do it quickly, okay? I hope this helped all of you. I wanted you to have more than sufficient time, which is why I did it now and not like 3 days before the clock change. I wanted you all to know how to navigate your way around this. If you have questions, if you're in the Ultimate Baby Sleep group, post there. Otherwise, you can send us a PM, Aubrey, me, if you're interested in getting our help with this. Anything you want, we're here for you. Okay? Have an amazing Tuesday, and I hope you all beautifully and smoothly navigate your way through the upcoming clock change and are not exhausted because now you know exactly what to do. All right? Take care.